This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, welcome everybody. Thank you everyone for coming. We have a very important, interesting topic tonight, which is relevant for the upcoming Yom Tif of Shavuos, Haba Aleinu L'Taiva. And we're going to begin with a dilemma, great dilemma, that the Chasam Sofer had. And Chasam Sofer tells us in his Chidushim on Masechta Avodah Zarah, Daf Samach Gimel Amud Beis. And he writes like this. If you look, we have it underlined. He says, V'yagati harbe, I toiled greatly. V'loi matzasi, I have not found a source for the following rule. Minolon l'Rabbanon ha. How do the rabbis know? The katan shenoilad umuter ba'achoisai ubitoi ve'imai. What does this mean? One of the very important rules in Shas is a rule called ger shenesgayer kekatan shenoilad ami. When a non-Jew converts, he's like a newborn baby. He has no connection to his previous existence. He's entering a new world. He's completely cut off from what was. Whatever was, and whatever will be, will be. And there's no connection at all between the two, to the extent that unbelievable, so that's mind-boggling. If you have a guy, if a man and a woman who are brother and sister both convert together, midairaisa, they could marry each other. If a mother and daughter, a mother and son, both convert together, they could marry each other. If a father and daughter both convert together, midairaisa, they're allowed to marry each other. Why? But what do you, this guy fathered the kid. The answer is, no, he didn't. This man and this child have nothing to do with each other. They have nothing in common. What happened in a previous existence, that was a long time ago. That was in a different world. That's the halacha. It's a biblical halacha. That ger shenesgayer kekatan sheno adam. Imagine a brother and sister. You know, it will be the biggest scandal in history, but that's the halacha. Now, midrabanon, the Rabbanon came in and they, set the matter straight so that you don't have anything inappropriate going on. But midoraisa, on a biblical level, there's a rule, ger shenesgayer kekatan sheno adam. Two people convert, you can marry your daughter, your sister, your mother. Okay? It says Chasam Sofer, there's a beautiful halacha. But where do the Rabbanon get it from? What's the source? Where in the Torah Shebechsav is there any allusion to this principle of ger shenesgayer kekatan sheno adam? Okay, and says Chasam Sofer, very interesting expression. V'yagati harbe, I toiled greatly. V'loi matzasi, I couldn't find the source. Now you can imagine if the Chasam Sofer is saying he toiled greatly, he must have scanned through Shas many, many times. He must have scanned through Kol HaTorah Kula, and he could not come up with an adequate, sufficient source. Where do Chazal derive ger shenesgayer kekatan shenoilad ami? Comes the Meshech Chachma. Meshech Chachma Meir Simcha of Dvinsk. There was a Talmud Chacham in this neighborhood who was a Talmud of Rabbi Glatstein, who was a Talmud of Rabbi Meir Simcha. So he heard from Rabbi Meir Simcha, and he himself, this Rabbi Glatstein, was in Dvinsk. How big was Dvinsk? How big was the city of Dvinsk? Dvinsk was so small that if you started Ashrei, by the time you got up to Soimech Hashem L'chol HaNoiflim, you're already out of the city. Okay? That's how small the city of Dvinsk was. So says the Meshech Chachma. Now the way he quotes over the comment of the Chasam Sofer is very interesting. Not only does he quote over the Chasam Sofer that the Chasam Sofer toiled greatly to discover and uncover the source for ger shenesgayer kekatan sheno adam, says Rav Meir Simcha, the Chasam Sofer was bothered his entire life from where do Chazal derive the rule ger shenesgayer kekatan sheno adam. You look on the second line, number 2, ki niskashe kol yamav mehechan haitziu Chazal. From where do Chazal derive? So in other words, the Chasam Sofer had this lifelong dilemma, lifelong search and research project. Whenever the Chasam Sofer had a free moment, he's thinking to himself, where does this rule come from? I mean, how do Chazal know a father and daughter, they both convert, they can marry each other? Says the Meshech Chachma, Chasam Sofer didn't know his whole life. I know like that. I'll tell you instantly the source in the Torah, ger shenesgayer kekatan sheno adam. And the source is like this. The Jews that left Egypt, presumably, many Jews were married to relatives. For example, the greatest proof is Amram, the father of Moshe Rabbeinu, who was the Gadol Hadar. He's married to his aunt. Are you allowed to marry your aunt? Can't marry your aunt, right? I know you wouldn't want to, but you can't marry your aunt, yeah? Amram married his aunt. And if the Gadol Hadar married a relative, presumably many other Jews followed suit. There were probably many Jews married to relatives before the Torah was given. Now we know, in anticipation of Kabbalas HaTorah, the pasuk says, "Vayomer el ha'am." Hashem tells the people, "Hayu nechayim l'shloshas yamim." Prepare yourselves for 3 days. Al tikshu el ha'isha. Don't come close to your wives. We know that before Kabbalas HaTorah, the Jews had to separate from their wives for 3 days. Okay, 3 day separation. Fine. So now the Torah is given. Now they still have not gotten word that they could go back to their wives. Whereupon in Parshas Vaschanan, the Rebbeinu Shalom tells Klal Yisrael, Shavu lachem la'oya alechem. Go back to your tents. Says the Gemara Moed Katan, Ein oyel ela ishtai. Your tent refers to your wife. Says the Gemara, after the Torah was given, God tells Klal Yisrael, go back to your wife. Ask the Meshech Chochmah, go back to your wife. Not every Jew could go back to their wives. Many Jews were married to their relatives. Many Jews were married to their aunt, married to other relatives. So how could the Rebbeinu Shalom tell Jews, go back to your wife? Maybe some people could go back to their wives, but not the Jews who were previously married to their relatives. Elamai, what do we see from here? It must be that since at Kabbalas HaTorah, not only did the Rebbeinu Shalom give Klal Yisrael the Torah, but we also converted. The Gemara in Yevamis on Mem Vav Amud Beis says that the Jews at Har Sinai, they converted, they did bris milah, they went to the mikvah, and they had sprinkled on them the blood of the carbon, milah, tefillah hazah. And in fact, the Gemara in Yevamis Mem Vav Amud Beis learns out the dinim of Geros from Kabbalas HaTorah. So the Jews at Har Sinai, they converted. So you know how God could tell every last Jew, go back to your wife? You know how Hashem could tell Amram, go back to your aunt? Because they converted at Kabbalas HaTorah. Before the Torah was given, we were all Goyim, we were Gentiles. And once the Torah was given, we became Jews. Right? We didn't eat gefilte fish until the Torah was given. Not before. Only Yidden could eat gefilte fish. So beforehand, we were Goyim. But now, at Kabbalas HaTorah, we became Jews. So therefore, the Rebbeinu Shalom could tell every Jew, go back to your wife. What do you mean now you can't marry your aunt? She's not my aunt. We're both converting. We were Goyim. Now we're Jews. Says the Meshech Chochmah, is a proof from here to the great rule. Ger shenis gayer katan shenol adam. You got it? The proof is, because Rebbeinu Shalom told every Jew, go back to your wife. Many Jews were married to relatives. It must be how? How did Rebbeinu Shalom say, go back to your wife? Because since this was akin to Geros, this was tantamount to Geros, therefore, let's say Amram converted. His aunt, Yocheved, converted. So two converts can now marry each other, and therefore this is a proof to the rule of Ger shenis gayer katan shenol adam. Okay? So what the Chasam Sofer was bothered his whole life, says the Meshech Chochmah, I have a simple proof from the pasuk, return to your tents. Right? Like Shlomo Kabach has a song, right? Return, but a little different, right? Return to your tents. Fine.
They were Jews before. What's the converting?
They weren't Jews. Who says they were Jews before?
Bnei Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov.
They were Bnei Avram, but according to this, they were Megayer. That means they were not considered Yisrael until Kabbalas HaTorah.
Did they have to do Kedushin now? They had to,
Yeah, they had to do Kedushin. Sure, everybody says they had to do Kedushin. Certainly they had to do Kedushin. Now Rabbi said the Meshech Chochmah is very difficult to understand. Number one, in the week after Shavuos, this is very rare. Normally the week after Shavuos is Parshas Nasai. Every rabbi knows that Parshas Nasai is the hardest Parsha of the year, because you have no time to prepare for Parshas Nasai. Right? Usually Shavuos is middle of the week, and all of a sudden, you have no time, you have to give a drash on Parshas Nasai. This year, Nasai is before Shavuos, Bahaloischa is the week after Shavuos. So, in Parshas Bahaloischa, we find in the inyan of Klal Yisrael collecting the man. Now the man, even though they trained us in kindergarten that the man was a good thing, the man was a bad thing. The man was terrible. The man was horrible. The man was painful. Right? Because even though it could taste like anything you want, but it had no visual appearance. So imagine every night, your wife says, here, drink this water. So what, water for supper? Yeah, it will taste like whatever you want. Right? So after a few days, you're going to have to be institutionalized. Right? Go out of your mind. The mun had no visual appearance. So even though it tasted good, it was very painful, it was very distressing, it was torturous. Okay. Now take a look at number 3, Pasuk Yud. Vayishma Moshe es ha'am boichel lemishpachaisav. Moshe Rabbeinu, he hears the Jewish people, they're crying. Not the babies, the adults. They were crying. Ish lepesach ahalai. Every man by the opening of his tent. Zakt Rashi, what were they crying about? Says Rashi, Rabbi Seinu Amru, lemishpachaisav aliske mishpachais. They were crying about family life. Al arayos hanesos lahem. Now that the Torah was given, and the Rebbeinu Shalom said you could marry stam a lady, but you can't marry a relative. So there were many Jews who had to wish their wives farewell. Can you imagine that? Imagine a guy, he's married for 60 years. He just had his 60th anniversary, right? And all the children and grandchildren came over, and they made a nice video for them, and they had a big cake. And now the Torah is given, and everything's over. You got to move on. So people were crying. Nebuch. Imagine a whole lifetime shared together, and the Torah is given. You had to say goodbye. So therefore, Moshe Rabbeinu heard many Jews were crying. Wait a second. But the Meshech Chachma just told me that at Kabbalas HaTorah the Jews converted, and Gershon is Gayer is katan shenel adami. So even though the Rebbeinu Shalom said you can't live with your aunt anymore, she's not my aunt. She's not my sister. She's not my daughter. She's not my mother. So why were the Jews crying? According to the Meshech Chachma, that the source in the Torah of Gershon is Gayer katan shenel adami is Shuvu lachem lo yalechem, where the Rebbeinu Shalom said, go back to your wives. How could they go back to their wives, says the Meshech Chachma? Because a convert who converts is like a newborn child. So what were these Jews crying about the arayos that became usher to them? You hear the question? Good kasha, right? This is the question of Rav Moshe Sternbach in Mayadim Uzmanim, Chelek Zayin, Siman Reish Lamed Ches. So you have to say, according to the Meshech Chachma, that the Jews were not crying because they had married arayos previously, and now they would have to separate from their wives. No, really, no Jewish men would have to separate from their wives, because Gershon is Gayers katan shenel adami. What they were crying about is now that the Torah was given, their future options are limited. Because now that the Torah was given, if they were to marry someone, they cannot then go ahead and marry that woman's sister. So it's not, according to the Meshech Chachma, you have to say, it's not that they were crying over past arayos. Past arayos were mutter, because Gershon is Gayers katan shenel adami. What were they crying over? They were crying about future arayos. So first of all, that is very difficult to say. It's not mashma that way in Rashi. That's what they were crying about. Imagine a grown man. So what are you crying? Because if I marry another wife, then I can't marry her sister later. That's what you're crying about now? You're worried about it when it happens. That's what you're crying? The simple meaning of Chazal is that there were men who were crying because they had to separate from their wives right now. I mean, it's very, very difficult to say they were crying because they were worried that if they got married, imagine some 19-year-old guy. Why are you crying? Because in 4 years, when his parents let him go out, then he's worried that he can't marry his wife's sister. I mean, but that's what you have to say according to Meshech Chachma. They were not crying about past arayos, they were crying about future arayos. Another very big difficulty with this Meshech Chachma is the episode of Eldad and Medad. Now, take a poll over here. Yeah? Who are Eldad and Medad? Anybody know?
Step brothers.
They are very good. Moshe Rabbeinu's brothers. Brothers? Moshe Rabbeinu brothers. We know Aaron, Miriam. So Tosfos says, look at number 5, Das the Kenyan Valley. Tosfos says that when the Torah was given, Amram was yeah, great. Anochi Hashem lekecha, yeah, I'm good with that. No, don't bow down to idols. Good. Shabbos, good. But when he hears, the Yisra of Arayas, he almost chokes. Now what do I do with my wife? He's married to his aunt. Says Tosfos, when the Torah was given, Amram separated from his wife Yocheved. He sent her packing. Said he was around. He was around. Yeah, he was there. Amram had to leave his wife, and Amram remarried a woman, and from that union it produced Eldad and Medad. And Eldad and Medad, who, right, we know that they come reporting to Moshe. Moshe Rabbeinu, Eldad and Medad misnavim b'machaneh. You have some competitors, right? You have two guys, they're also saying Nevuah. Who are Eldad and Medad? The brothers of Moshe Rabbeinu when Amram separated from his wife. But wait a second. Why would Amram have to separate from his wife? According to the Meshech Chachma, when the Jews received the Torah, they converted. Gershon is Gaius katan shenoy ladami. That's why Rebbeinu Shalom says, Shuvu lachem lo yalechem, return to your tents. Why would Amram have to separate from his wife? What do we see from all of this? Not like the Meshech Chachma. That for some reason, even though the Jews did convert at Kabbalas HaTorah, we would not apply the rule of Gershon is Gayer katan shenoy ladami to the relationships the Jews had before Matan Torah. That is why Amram had to separate from his wife. That is why when the Klal Yisrael found out about the Yisrael Arayos, they were crying because they knew they would have to separate from their wives. So we have two very strong questions on the Meshech Chachma, and we're going to bring a proof. We're going to bring a proof, not like the Meshech Chachma, that in fact to the Gerus of Kabbalas HaTorah we do not apply the rule of Gershon is Gayer katan shenoy. In other words, even though, yes, in fact, the Jews did convert at Kabbalas HaTorah, they converted, they had Milah, they had Tefillah, they had Hazah, but to that type of Gerus, we're going to prove we do not apply the rule of Gershon es Gayer katan shenoy. I saw this proof many years ago, maybe 8-9 years ago, in a Sofer Beis Av of Reb Eli Baruch Shulman, and he, in like a footnote, he brings this proof, I believe, and that is from Halach and Even HaEzer. And that is like this. The Shulchan Aruch writes in Even HaEzer, Siman Tesvav, Sif Yud Beis. It's the number 6 on your sheets. That Avraham Avinu is Asur to every single Jewish woman, and Sarah Imenu is Asura to every Jewish man. Okay, so what does this halacha mean? We know a man can't live with his daughter, cannot live with his granddaughter. What about a great-granddaughter? Is a great-granddaughter an Isser Erva? Not Midairaisa, it's an Isser Midrabana. And therefore, Avraham Avinu is Asur to every Jewish woman, because every Jewish woman is Avraham Avinu's great-granddaughter. And Sarah Imenu is Asura to every Jewish man, because every Jewish man is Sarah Imenu's great-grandson. So I ask you a simple question. Why would Avraham be Asur to every Jewish woman? But when the Jewish people got the Torah, we converted. And Gershon is Gayer is katan shenoy ladami. If a father and daughter convert, they can marry each other. Certainly, a great-grandfather like Avraham should be permitted to marry all his future descendants, because when the Torah was given, they all converted. It's a proof from here, not like the Meshech Chachma, that to the Gerus of Kabbalas HaTorah, we do not apply the rule of Gershon es Gayer katan shenoy. So Rabbi said, what we would have to explain then is why not? Because nobody would argue, everybody agrees that the Jews converted at Kabbalas HaTorah. We learn now Dinei Gerus from Kabbalas HaTorah. The Jews went to the mikvah, they had Milah, and they had Kabbalas HaMitzvahs. Whatever a ger does, the Jews did at Har Sinai. Why then would we say, Amram, you gotta separate from your wife. Jews, you gotta separate from Arayos. Why would we not apply the rule of Gershon es Gayer katan shenoy ladami to the relationships of Kabbalas HaTorah? Okay, so we're going to offer two approaches. Number one, when did the Jewish people start? Who was the first Jew? Who was the first Jew? What do you have to do to be a Jew? Milah? Kabbalas HaMitzvahs? Eating matzah balls? What makes you a Jew? What's the definition of a Jew?
Jewish mother.
Jewish mother. Did Avraham have a Jewish mother? No. So who was the first Jew? You should know the answer. It's a machlokes. It's a machlokes rishonim. It's a machlokes between the Ramban and the Sarfasim, the French Balei Tosfos. The French Balei Tosfos say that there was no such thing as being a Jew until the Torah was given. Before the Torah was given, we were goyim. We were goyim. And before the Torah was given, if you're a guy, Goyim follow patrilineal descent, they don't follow matrilineal descent. And that's why if you look in Parsha Semar, the Mekalel is given, his lineage is given after his father, Vishay, right? Ish Mitzri. Why? Because before the Torah was given, you follow the father. Says the Ramban, I don't agree. Take a look at number 7, the last 2 lines. Says the Ramban, Ve'in daiti ken, I do not agree. Ki me'es sheba Avraham bivris hayu Yisrael. From the moment Avraham had bris milah, we were Jews. Uva goyim lo yischashvu, we did not have any connection to the goyim. Says the Ramban, how do I know Avraham was a Jew? Ready for this? A very important raya. Do goyim have the power of inheritance midairaisa? Let's say a guy's parents die. Okay, so legally, according to American law, they inherit. Does the Torah recognize the power for a guy to inherit? Says the Gemara, yes. Goyim could inherit midairaisa. What's the proof? There's a pasuk ki Yerusha la'Esav nasati es har seir, that I gave Esav har seir as a Yerusha. So says the Gemara in Kedusha and Chasam Beis, we see from there that Chasam and Aleph that Goyim could inherit midairaisa because Esav has Yerusha. It says ki la'Esav nasati Yerusha. Says the Gemara, you can't bring a raya from Esav because Esav wasn't a guy. Esav was a Yisrael Mumar. He's a Jew who went off the derech. Ask Ramban, Esav was a Jew who went off the derech. I thought there was no such thing as Jews until the Torah was given. How could you call Esav a Jew that went off the derech? What do you see from here? That there were Jews even before the Torah was given. Esav was a Jew. So now what are you going to say? Who's the first Jew? Esav was the first Jew? It must be the first Jew was Avraham Avinu. So says Ramban, you see from this Gemara, that if the Gemara calls Esav a Yisrael Mumar, it must be the Jewish people already began from the times of Avraham Avinu. So I'll ask you a question. If we were Jewish but from the times of Avraham Avinu, then why do you have to convert? Right? If you're Jewish, you don't have to convert to Judaism. If you're a guy, you need to convert. But a Jew, well, what did we convert to? I mean, from the times, according to Ramban, from the times of Avraham, we were Jewish. So what exactly was the Geros of Kabbalas HaTorah? So says the Ritva, take a look at number 9. The Ritva in Ksuba says, De'ilu zera Avraham kvar nitztavu al amila. The descendants of Avraham were already commanded on Milah. Ula hachnisa mikanusam bevrisai. V'ein ze ela gemar geros. This was not a full-fledged conversion. This was just to seal the deal. This was just the makah b'patish. This was just the final step. So in other words, what the Ritva is saying, combined with the Ramban, is that really we were Jewish from the times of Avraham Avinu. What was the Geros of Kabbalas HaTorah? It was what we call a Gemar Geros. Really we were Jewish before, we just needed something extra. Now you ask, what more do you need? Once you're Jewish, you're Jewish. What were we missing? So if you look in Chidushay Granat, Hagan Rav Naftali Trop, he explains that we were lacking a certain degree of Kedushas Yisrael. We had a Din Yisrael, we had the halachic status of a Jew, but there was a dimension of sanctity, of Kedusha, that we did not have until the Torah was given, and it was that dimension that was added with the Geros of Kabbalas HaTorah. So therefore, it comes out like this. We asked the question, if the Jews at Kabbalas HaTorah converted, then why would they be usher to their wives? Why were they crying over Arayos? Why did Amram have to separate from them? So, right? After all, they converted. And Gershon is Gair katan Shnal Dami. The answer is, now we're saying, that even though they converted, it wasn't a regular conversion. They were Jewish the whole time. This was just a little bit of an additional Kedusha. Just a Tosefes Kedusha. This type of Gerus, which is just to add, which is just to increase, which is just to finish the deal, seal the deal. This type of Gerus does not come along with the special halachos of Gershon Esgar Kekatan Shinal Adami. And therefore the Jews, in fact, became usher to their spouses. Amram had to separate from Yocheved, and that's why the Jews were crying over the Yisur Arayos. Okay? That is one approach. But for the rest of the shiur, we're going to focus on a tremendous and unbelievable concept that's advanced by the Maharal and the Gur Aryeh. Another explanation why we do not apply the rule of ger shenisgayer katan shenal adami to the gerus of Kabbalas HaTorah. The Maharal says like this. We know once upon a time there was a man by the name of Shimon, right? Shimon, right? He's the son of Yaakov Avinu, yeah. And he has a lot of kids: Yemuel, Yamin, Ohad, Yachin, Soichar, and Shaul. But the Torah calls Shaul ben Aknanis. Shaul is the son of a Canaanite woman. Who is this? What? How is that possible? Shimon married a Canaanite? So what does Rashi say? Shimon married Dinah, his sister. Shimon married his sister? Says Rashi, when Dinah was violated by Shechem, she didn't want to leave. She didn't want to leave the city. She was afraid, right? Nobody would ever marry her. So Shimon said, nobody will ever know. Dinah said, with the yentas around who are going to check my shidduch resume, they're going to find out eventually. And not everybody knows everyone's business these days. They're going to find out. Now, we'll take it off the resume. No, everything is out in the open. Someone's going to spill the beans. Dinah knew she'll never find a shidduch. So Shimon said, you know what? I'll marry you. You happy? He said, fine. So Shimon marries his sister. Mazel tov. So, here's the problem. Shimon marries his sister? You can't marry your sister. Especially the Avos. We know the Avos kept the Torah before it was given. Presumably, not only did Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov keep the Torah, but their children, the Shvatim, also kept the Torah. So how could Shimon marry his sister? Says the Maharal, a very fundamental concept. That this idea that the Avos kept the Torah, did they have to keep the Torah? Or did they keep the Torah voluntarily? They kept it voluntarily. They kept the Torah as a ger who converted would keep the Torah. The same way when someone converts, does anybody have to convert? Whoever converts, they're doing it voluntarily. They're doing it on their own volition. They're doing it out of the goodness of their heart. The same way a ger does it voluntarily, the Avos and the Shvatim kept the Torah voluntarily like gerim. So just like a ger, if he would become a Jew, he would have to put on tefillin and talis and sit in the sukkah and eat matzah. But he would be mutter to arayos because ger shenisgayer katan shenal adami. So to Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, the Shvatim, they kept the Torah as if they would be gerim, and therefore they're allowed to live with arayos. You know how Yaakov could marry two sisters? Because Yaakov said, I don't have to keep the Torah. I'm keeping it because I want to. Treat me like a ger. A ger, these two ladies are also two giarisim. They're not related anymore. You know how Amram could marry his aunt? Because I don't have to keep the Torah. I'm keeping it out of my own volition. So I'm doing it voluntarily. A ger doesn't have to abide by the laws of arayos, because ger shenisgayer katan shenal adami. So therefore Amram can marry his aunt. Says the Maharal, the Avos kept the Torah, the Shvatim kept the Torah, but when it comes to arayos, they were not held down, they were not bogged down, they were not limited. Why? Because they kept the Torah on their own accord, they kept it voluntarily. Ger shenisgayer katan shenal adami. Okay? Ask the Maharal the $1 million question. You ready? The $1 million question. If the Klal Yisrael, if the Avos, if the Shvatim kept the Torah voluntarily, so when God gave the Torah to Klal Yisrael on Har Sinai, what was our reaction? Naseh v'nishma. Did we want to keep the Torah? Yeah. So we also accepted the Torah voluntarily. So then why, when the Torah was given, were the Jews crying about arayos? Why don't we also apply the rule? Ger shenisgayer katan shenal adami. We were accepting the Torah voluntarily. We were in fact gerim. Therefore we should be permitted to arayos. Says the Maharal, you ready for this? Says the Gur Aryeh, when do you say ger shenisgayer katan shenal adami? That's if you convert willingly. But when the Jews were given the Torah, we didn't accept it willingly. It was shoved down our throats. We were forced into it. We were coerced. Amar Rabbi Avdimi, Bar Chama, Bar Chasa, on the pasuk Vayisatzu b'tachtas Sahar Melamed Shekav Aleim Ahar Kegigis, V'Amar Lohem Im Mekamas HaTorah mutav. Ve'em lav, sham, tehei, kfurascha. Says Maral, the gerus of Matan Torah was not willing, it was coerced. We were forced into it. Rabbi Shem shoved it down our throats. Rabbi Shem said, you want the Torah? Yeah, now you want it. You see this mountain? Either take it or, I'm going to drop the mountain on your heads. So therefore, the rule of Gershon is Gai Katan Shanal Adami, says Maral, only applies to a gerus that is a willing gerus, that the ger wants to convert. But if the ger is forced to convert, we do not apply the rule of Gershon is Gai Katan Shanal Adami. A forced gerus is not a regular gerus. And since the Jews were coerced to accept the Torah, now by the way, there are many very important explanations. Because on the one hand, we were willing to accept the Torah. We said Nasa v'nishma. So we said Nasa v'nishma. Why did the Rebbeinu Shem have to force us into it? Right? It's a very big question, right? The Medrash Tanchuma, Parshas Noach says, Torah shebachsav we accepted willingly, Torah shebal peh we had to be forced. The Maral offers a suggestion, a beautiful suggestion. Maral says that anything that's forced has much more permanence. Proof is, man marries a woman, so it will continue, but there are ways out, right? There's something called gerushin. However, if a man is ma'anis a woman, la yuchal l'shalcha kol yamav, you can never send her away. The Rebbeinu Shem kiviyachal coerced the Jewish people. He was ma'anis us, so that he would never be able to send us away. That's what the Maral says. The Rebbeinu Shem was ma'anis Klal Yisrael, like anusa. He was never able to send us away. But bottom line is, says Maral, that the gerus of Kabbalas HaTorah was a different quality gerus. It wasn't willing, it was forced, and to a forced gerus, we do not apply the rule Gershon is Gayer Katan Shanel Adami. Okay? Now why? What's the difference? Who cares if it's a gerus that we agree upon, or if it's forced? A gerus is a gerus is a gerus. Why is Gershon is Gayer Katan Shanel Adami? What's the logic of it? Because when someone converts, they're entering a new existence. They're cutting themselves off from the previous existence. They have no connection to their being Goyim. So who cares whether they agreed or whether they're forced? Either way, it's a new existence. We'll have to see. Comes Rabbi Leib HaKohen. Who's Rabbi Leib HaKohen? Rabbi Leib HaKohen is the author of three of probably the most important works of Lamdos that are learned in all the Olam HaYeshivos. Rabbi Leib HaKohen wrote the K'tzois HaChoshen, Shev Shmaitza, and the Avnei Miluim. And we once had a shiur a little while ago from Rabbi Glatstein about the Purim story. We said over the Maisa, where they once asked Rabbi Leib HaKohen, why were you Zoicha that your three Sfarim were Nespashet B'chol Yisrael? Why did you have the merit that your three Sfarim are probably more than any other Sfarim learned in the Olam HaYeshivos? You remember what his chus was? He was very ill, he was very sick, and 3 times in his life he had to eat on Yom Kippur. So they said, what? Because you ate on Yom Kippur, you're a Zoicha? He said like this, 3 times in my life I had to eat on Yom Kippur, and I had so much tsar that I had to eat on Yom Kippur, and I wanted so badly to have fasted. Those were the 3 biggest mitzvahs I ever did in my life. Okay? Very big musar. You know, sometimes people are limited by circumstance, and they wish they could do a mitzvah. Sometimes being limited by circumstance, wishing you could do a mitzvah is on a higher level than actually doing it. But in any event, Rabbi Leib HaKohen was very poor. He was so poor, it was so cold in his house, that he had to sleep with his inkwell under his arm, because otherwise it would freeze. Okay? By the way, the Magen Avram was so poor, he could not afford to buy paper. He wrote the Magen Avram on the walls of his house. And the Magen Avram that we have today, he wrote on the walls of his house. That's how poor these people were. Okay, in any event, the Shev Shmaitza, in his Hakdamah to the Shev Shmaitza, is a very big fan of the Maral, of the Svara of the Maral. And the Svara is, again, that the Gerus of Kabbalas HaTorah is a different quality of Gerus. It was not willing, it was not accepted b'ratzon. We were forced into it. A forced Gerus is different than a regular Gerus. Yeah? Now he brings the following proof. You got a halt cup for the proof. If you get it, you're going to be licking your chops. Okay? It's mamish geshmak. You won't have to eat for at least 10 minutes after the shiur, right? If you get this. It's delicious, okay? Listen to this. This is the raya of the Shev Shmaitza. Let's say you have a guy, and he decides to convert. And before he converted, he had 13 boys, 17 girls. Yeah, he had 30 kids. Now we tell him, oh, you're a yid now. Now you got to do mitzvahs. You got to put on tefillin. You got to keep Shabbos. Pru-ravu. You got to procreate. So the guy says, procreate? That's, that's my second name. I have 30 kids. Yeah? You say, yeah, but those kids you had when you were a guy. Now you have to have... Does a guy who convert have to have more children? So machlokes acharina. Machlokes Amoram. Rabbi Yochanan says he doesn't have to have more kids. He has 30 kids, right? On his tax return, he's filling out, 30 dependents. He has 30 kids. They're not Jewish. They don't care whether they're Jewish or not. He has 30 kids in this world that he has to support. When the kids come home from, they're billing him for his kids at a point, right? Rish Lakish says no. He has to have more kids. You know why? They're not his kids. Ger shenisgayer katan shenoila adami. It's machlokes Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish. Rabbi Yochanan says he has kids. He has enough kids already. Rish Lakish says you got to do it again, right? Ger, because his previous kids are not attributed to him. Ger shenisgayer katan shenoila adami. Second question. What is the mitzvah pru-ravu? How many kids?
2 and 2.
Machlokes Beis Shammai Beis Hillel. Beis Shammai says 2 boys. Beis Hillel says boy and a girl. Right? By the way, that's one mitzvah. There's another mitzvah of every one is another mitzvah. V'le'erav al tanach yadecha. But the mitzvah pru-ravu, according to Beis Shammai, is 2 boys. According to Beis Hillel, boy and a girl. Says the Gemara, where does Beis Hillel learn it out from? Boy and a girl. That's how God created the world. Adam and Eve. Remember? Good old Adam and Eve. They're a boy and a girl. So therefore, the same way God created the world, boy and a girl, so Beis Hillel says the mitzvah of procreation is a boy and a girl. Beis Shammai says no. You know where we learn out the mitzvah of pru-ravu from? Holy Moses. Moshe Rabbeinu. Yeah? Moshe Rabbeinu has 2 boys, and then he separates from his wife. He has Gershom and Eliezer, then he separates. So we learn out, says Beis Shammai, from Moshe Rabbeinu, that the mitzvah of pru-ravu is 2 boys. Okay, you ready for this? Beis Shammai just walked into the room. Yeah, everybody stand up, and we have a question for Beis Shammai. Beis Shammai, I have a question for you, Beis Shammai. You claim that Moshe Rabbeinu fulfilled the mitzvah of pru-ravu by having 2 boys. Excuse me, Beis Shammai. Moshe Rabbeinu had those kids when he was a guy, before Kabbalas HaTorah. After Kabbalas HaTorah, he's a Jew. Rish Lakish says, you got to do it again. So how could you, Beis Shammai, say that Moshe Rabbeinu fulfilled the mitzvah pru-ravu? That's good according to Rabbi Yochanan, that if you have kids as a guy, you don't have to do it again. But according to Rish Lakish, that if you have kids as a guy, you got to do it again. How come Moshe Rabbeinu did not have more children after the Torah was given? What happened, right? Rish Lakish would say, Moshe's kids don't count. Gershon is Gayer, Katan Shenoila Adami, right? Rish Lakish says that if you have children as a guy, you gotta start over, because your children are not your children. Gershon is Gayer, Katan Shenoila Adami. So why didn't Moshe have to have more kids? We see from here that the gerus of Kabbalas HaTorah was a different kind of gerus. We don't apply Gershon es Gayer Kikatan Shnodam to the gerus of Matan Torah. Why? Because it was forced. We see from here a gavaldik araya to the Maral that the gerus of Kabbalas HaTorah was a different kind of gerus. Normally, if you're a guy and you convert, you have to have more kids according to Rish Lakish, because you converted. Your kids are not your kids. But for the gerus of Kabbalas HaTorah, that was a forced gerus, and a forced gerus is not a regular gerus. We do not apply the rule of Gershon es Gayer Katan Shenoila Adami. So the raya to the Maral is from Holy Moses, Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu did not have more children after the Torah was given. Why? Why doesn't he have more kids? What happened to Gershon es Gayer? It must be, it does not apply to the gerus of Kabbalas HaTorah.
command from Hashem, Topu Amudi Modi?
That's what Beis Hillel says. Beis Shammai says he did it because he was Mekayim the mitzvah. Okay? That's what Beis Hillel says. Beis Shammai says he separated because he fulfilled the mitzvah. The question is, he didn't fulfill the mitzvah. He's Jew now. He has to do it again. It must be the Gerus of Kabbalah Satar. We do not say Gersh Neskar Katan Shnal Dami. Now comes along the Kli Chemda. I don't believe we featured him in a very long time. Kli Chemda, Rav Meir Dan Palatsky. Meir Dan Palatsky was a Talmud of the Avnei Nezer and one of the founders of Agudas Yisrael. The concept of Agudas Yisrael, he was one of the founders in Europe, of Meir Dan Palatsky, and he comes up with a Go'ainistik Akasha. Number one, what is the svara, what's the logic, that for a regular Geros, we do say Gershin Eskai Katan Shadal Adami. And if the Geros is forced, we don't say it? What difference does it make? Forced or not forced, willing or not willing. Geros is Geros is Geros. And number two, listen to this question. He says to the Shav Shmaitza, you want to prove from the fact that Moshe Rabbeinu did not have more children after the Torah was given, that proves that the Geros of Kabbalah Satorah is different because it's forced? Wait a second. Klal Yisrael was forced. Moshe Rabbeinu was not forced. Because how do we know the Klal Yisrael was forced? Because the pasuk says, "Vayisyatzvu betachtis hahar." They were sitting at the foot of the mountain. That's where the Jews were. But Moshe was Moshe Allah Elokim. Moshe's on top of the mountain. Moshe doesn't have any mountains over his head. Moshe was Makabel Torah bi'ava u'v'ratzain. He was never forced. So what's the Shev Shmaitza saying? Oh, I'll prove to you the Maral is right. That a forced Geros is not a regular Geros. Because why didn't Moshe Rabbeinu have more kids? Oh, it must be because Moshe Rabbeinu was forced. Moshe Rabbeinu was never forced. He was never forced. He wasn't under the mountain. The Jews were under the mountain. Right? Vayisyatsu b'tachtis ahar. Moshe is Moshe Alakim. Moshe's on the top of the mountain. So he had the Geros. He accepted her willingly. For him, the Geros was B'ratzain. So for him, we should say what? Gershin Eskai Katan Shana Adami. So we're back to the question: why didn't Moshe have more kids after the Torah was given? Yeah, got to think about that. Rabbi say tonight, take home the sheets. Take a look at number 14. Think about it. Think about this question. It will sharpen your mind. If until sometimes you go through life, you get cobwebs in your head. You get dust. Cobwebs, spiders start making webs. You can't think clearly. You can't think sharp. You understand this question? You're going to be the sharp like a tack. Okay? Again, one more time. The whole proof that the Maral is right, that a forced Geros is not a regular Geros is what? Because why didn't Moshe have more kids after the Torah was given? Must be that a forced Geros is what? Not a regular Geros. But wait a second, Moshe Rabbeinu was never forced. He's on top of the mountain.
You gave the answer last week to this question.
Yeah.
Just like you had a kid.
Oh, that's how he did it.
Yeah.
All right, you're a few steps ahead. Okay. No, but that's not what Beis Shammai says. Because Beis Shammai said, that's what you say. But Beis Shammai says that he was Mekayim the mitzvah, right? He was Mekayim the mitzvah. Okay. So says the Kli Chemda, what's the logic of, by a forced Geros, we do not apply the rule of Gershin Eskai Katan Shana? Listen to this far. What's the logic that you have a brother and sister who before they were Jewish, they could not marry each other, and now that they're Jews, they can marry each other? They're from the same father and mother. The answer is, no. Their relation was from a previous existence. When they were Goyim, they served idols, they believed in the constellations, they were down in the Koyach HaTumah, and now they're entering a new realm. They're coming under the protection of the wings of the Shekhinah. They're elevating themselves. They're becoming Yidden. They're entering a new existence. They're cutting themselves off from the past to enter a new existence. Why did the Rebbeinu Shalom force us to accept the Torah? You know why he forces us to accept the Torah? Because the Torah is the very fabric of the existence of Klal Yisrael. You can't have Jews without the Torah. God created Klal Yisrael for the Torah. Bereshis b'shvil Yisrael shenik bereshis, b'shvil Torah shenik bereshis. The Torah was our destiny. That's why we went down to Mitzrayim in the first place. Why did God shove the Torah down our throats? Because you can't have a Jew without Torah. We are a nation, right? Rav Sadi Gaon says, "Ein umma seinu umma b'li Torah." What makes us a people is the Torah. The reason God forced us to accept the Torah is because the Torah is part of our makeup. It's part of our existence. It's part of our reality. It's part of our metzius. The fact that the Rebbeinu Shalom forced us to accept the Torah showed that the Torah was our destiny. So what are you going to say? That when we accepted the Torah, it was a gerus, and now we have no connection to our previous existence? We're entering a new realm? We're not entering a new realm. This is what we were always meant to be. This is who we always were. This is what we were preparing for. This is what we were created for. Normally, Geiros means we're cutting ourselves off from the past. What? When Klal Yisrael accepted the Torah, we were cutting ourselves off from Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov? We're cutting ourselves off from our tradition? Of course not. The giving of the Torah was a different kind of Geiros. Normally, Geiros is, okay, I'm taking my past, I'm throwing it out in the garbage, I'm starting a new existence. When the Jews got the Torah, it wasn't beginning a new existence. It was, finally, we're here already. We've been preparing for this since the times of Avraham Avinu. It did not put them in a new realm. It did not cut them off from the past. The fact that God forced us meant this was implicit in who we were going to be. And therefore, even though Moshe Rabbeinu was not forced, because he's on the top of the mountain, it's not forced, not forced. It's the fact that God forced us. It revealed that this kind of Geiros is different than every other Geiros. Every other Geiros is what was in the past, and now we're starting something entirely new. No! The Geiros of Kabbalah Satar was something we were preparing for, we were destined to have. It was something that was part of our makeup. And therefore, for that type of Geiros, we do not apply the rule of Ger shenisgayer katan shenar ladami. Comes the Sheb Shmaitza, and he adds, we're going to add one Nakuda, okay? He says like this. When the Jews got the Torah, why didn't they cry about the Arayos? Right? They should have cried then. No, they don't cry about the Arayos until next week's Parsha, Parshas B'Haloscha, when they're complaining about the mun. Why, when they're complaining about the mun, do they start crying about the Arayos? So now I want to tell you something very important about the mun. You know, Maran Bet Yosef had a very good chavrusa. Who was his chavrusa? An angel. He had a malach come learn with him. Yeah? One of the things the malach taught the Beis Yosef was that the mun was a critical ingredient in Kabbalah Satorah. In that, by the Jews eating this heavenly food, this is the food that angels eat, it removed from their hearts any physical taiva. They had no desire for gashmias. They had no desire for food, for any physicality. All they desired was the Torah. In fact, the mun forced the Jews to accept the Torah. Had it not been for the mun, so when Hashem offered us the Torah, we'd have said, Torah? I don't know. Come back tomorrow. I'll let you know tomorrow. Right? The mun removed any free choice from our hearts. It forced us to accept the Torah. The Alshich writes, V'ha'am hisavu taiva. Hisavu taiva, very interesting expression. Hisavu taiva means they had a taiva to have a taiva. What does that mean? They saw something enticing, and they said, I wish I would want it. They didn't even have a taiva for it. A lot of times in life, I'm going to tell you a big trick now. Most things in life that a person desires, you can't even get. Right? Most things, a person sees something, they get excited. Think about it, you can't get that. There's no way to get it. But the Yetzer Hara gives a person a certain geschmack out of wanting something that's aser. There's something that gives a person a thrill. You have a thrill of wanting something that you can't have. The Jewish people didn't have that thrill anymore. When they saw something, they said, I wish I would want it. They didn't even want it. It was painful to them that they didn't have taiva. What stopped them from having taiva? The mun. It was like the mun was some kind of supernatural, spiritual food that removed from their hearts any physical taiva. So what forced us to accept the Torah? The mun. Had it not been for the mun, we could have accepted the Torah willingly. If we would have accepted the Torah willingly, then we would have been like regular Gerim. And we would be permitted ba'arayos. So had it not been for the mun, when God gave us the Parsha of Arayos, we could say, I could still be married to my aunt. I would have accepted the Torah willingly. The mun forced us to accept the Torah. Once the mun forced us to accept the Torah, now we don't apply the rule of Gershin Eskaya Katan Shana Adami anymore. And now we're Asr Ba'arayos. So it's when the Jews got the mun, that's when they cried about the Arayos. Because it's the mun that made it that the rule of Gershin Eskaya does not apply and made them Asr Ba'arayos. What?
And Moshe Rabbeinu was also forced.
And Moshe Rabbeinu was also forced. And again, the Sfar is not just they were forced, but the Sfar we're saying is, since this was their destiny and it had to be this way, this showed that it did not create a major change in their personality. Okay. So Rabbi said, bottom line is like this. Chasam Sofer said his whole life he searched, what is the source in Tanakh for Gersh and Eskaya Katan Shna Adam? So Meshach Chacham said, the source is very clear. Because Rebbe Shalom told all of Klal Yisrael, go back to your wives, even women who are Isser Ba'arayos. What do you mean? Must be Gersh and Eskaya Katan Shna Adami. But we have already said this is not such a good proof. First of all, this type of Gerus we don't say Gersh and Eskaya Katan Shna Adami. Because they were already Jews. It was just the Gemar. Second of all, it was forced. So we're up the creek without a paddle. What source is there in the Torah for the rule of Gersh and Eskaya Katan Shna Adami? Is there any makar in the written law, in the Torah Shabbat, to this rule of Gersh and Eskaya Katan Shna Adami? So if you take a look on your sheets in number 17, take a look at number 17. There's a Sefer Ravid Hazav. Sefer Ravid Hazav says, perhaps the source is from a very well-known pasuk in Parshas Lech Lecha. It says about Avram Avinu. Avram Avinu converted many people, and it says V'es hanefesh asher asu b'char. He made them. He made them. He didn't make them. He didn't bring them into the world. He did bring them into the world. Why? Because ger shenis gayer kekatan shenoil adami. This is a source offered by the Sefer Ravid Hazav. Very difficult to say that, because there's no drush in all of Shas that, how do I know Gersh and Eskaya Katan Shna Adami from the pasuk of V'yes hanefesh asher asu b'charan? It's like, hey, he's an achroin, can't make up his own drasha. Others say there's a very interesting Baal HaTurim. Look at number 18 for a moment. Baal HaTurim says, Leisate mishpat ger yasem. Do not pervert the judgment of a convert or an orphan. It should say ger a yasaim or ger vi yasaim. Why ger yasaim? As if every convert is an orphan? Is every convert an orphan? Says Baal HaTurim. You see from here, every convert is an orphan. Why? Because ger shenis gayer kekatan shenoil adami. Also a little bit difficult. Does that mean halachically every single convert has the halachic status of a ger? We don't necessarily say that. So Rabbi say, I don't know, Chasam Sofer could not find the source, so certainly we're not going to be able to find the source. But maybe the Rebbe Shalom sent my way. Perhaps we could make a suggestion over here. What is the makar in the Torah for Gersh and Eskaya Katan Shna Adami? Okay, you ready? A Gemara in Yavamis. Ready for this? And then with this we'll close. Says the Gemara on Daf Mem Chesed Beis, why do Gerim have a hard life in this world? We find an interesting phenomenon. Gerim often have things difficult. Why do Gerim have a hard life? Says the Gemara, Ram Gamliel, Chananya, the son of Ram Gamliel said, because when they were Goyim, they did not keep the 7 Noachide laws. They didn't keep the 7 mitzvahs b'nei Noach when they were Goyim. So ask the Gemara, Rabbi Yossi says, who cares? but once they convert, Gershon is Gayer, katan shenodam, and they're not accountable for a previous existence. And then the Gemara offers various interpretations. One opinion is, well, they convert, but they don't know all the halachos, or they're going to violate halacha. A ger converts. He might not know that you can't talk during Chazar Sashatz. So he might, chas v'shalom, talk during Chazar Sashatz. Or he might, chas v'shalom, talk during Berachas Krishma. He doesn't know. A Jew who's from birth, he knows you're not allowed to talk then. But maybe a ger didn't learn that halacha. He didn't learn the halacha that talking by Chazar Sashatz, the Shulchan Aruch says, is like murder. He never learned that halacha, so he doesn't know. Right? So he doesn't know that halacha. So there, right? He doesn't know it's gadol avonim in a say. He doesn't know it's the worst aveira in the whole Shulchan Aruch. He never learned that halacha. From people, we all know that halacha. We all know. No, but we would never do such a thing. But maybe he doesn't know that, and therefore, says the Gemara, maybe it's because of that. And then the Gemara, I know, I like to stick it in. And the Gemara offers other suggestions as well. The Gemara says, why do Gerim have a hard life? Acherim oimrim, others say, because they did not become Gerim soon enough. What took so long? Why did you take so long? You should have done it quicker. You should have done it sooner. And then the Gemara concludes, look at number 20, Amar Rabbi Avo, Vitem Rabbi Chanina, Maikra, what does the following pasuk mean? Boaz says to Rus, Yeshalem Hashem Pa'alech, God should reward you. Utihi maskurtech shleimah mim Hashem, and your recompense should be complete. Why? Asher bas lachzos, because you came to seek refuge. Says Rashi, what's the Gemara doing here? The Gemara is proving the opinion of the Acherim. The Acherim said, why do Gerim have a hard life? Because they didn't become Gerim soon enough. The Gemara says, I'll prove to you that it's very, very important to become a Ger right away. Because Boaz says to Rus, God should reward you, Asher bas, that you came. Says Rashi, that you came means you came right away and you didn't tarry. So the Gemara is bringing a proof. We just said Gerim have a hard life because they didn't become Gerim soon enough. To which the Gemara is saying, and you see Boaz tells Rus, God should reward you because you came a Ger very quickly. So many Rishonim are bothered by a question that Rus did not become a Ger very quickly. In fact, she was a very, very old lady when she converted. Because if you make a cheshbon, she was the granddaughter of Egloin Melech Moav. There were 200 years between Egloin and when Boaz married Rus. That would make Rus a very old lady. So Rus did not hurry. So therefore, the Ritva quotes his Rebbe, the Ra'ah, 3 lines in the end, number 21, who learns this Gemara completely differently. That you know what the Gemara is proving from this pasuk in Rus? The Gemara in the beginning brought the opinion of Rabbi Chananya, the son of Gamliel, who said, why do Gerim have a hard life? Because they didn't keep the Zayin Mitzvahs B'nai Noach. And the Gemara asked, what do you mean? They're not held accountable for not keeping the Zayin Mitzvahs? Because Gershon is Gayer Katan Shenoy Ladami. And the Gemara is concluding, I'll prove to you in the Torah there's something called Gershon is Gayer Katan Shenoy Ladami. Because Boaz says to Rus, God should reward you, Asher Bas, that you came. That I came? I'm an old lady. I came to the world a long time ago. Why are you saying that I came today? I didn't come to this world today. Says the Ra'ah, the fact that Boaz says to Rus, the words that you came, that indicates that the day she converted, that's the day she came to the world. This is a source in the Tanakh and in Shas to the rule of Gershon is Gayer Katan Shenoy Ladami. So perhaps that which Chasam Sofer was searching for, where in Tanakh is there a source for Gershon is Gayer Katan Shenoy Ladami? It's a pasuk in Rus, Asher Bas, that we're saying the day that Rus converted, she came to the world. Came to the world, yeah. Because on a day somebody converts, they're like a newborn child, and it's like they came to the world. So what, the Chasam Sofer didn't know this? So maybe the Chasam Sofer held, it still doesn't show that it's like you came to the world to such an extent that you can marry your sister. That far we don't see. Rabbi Yushalmi tells us that by the karbanos of all the Yom Tovim, it says you bring a Sayer as a chatas. Yeah? Except for by Shavuos. By Shavuos it just says bring a Sayer, it doesn't say the word chatas. So on Shabbos we gave one pshat, and now we're saying another pshat. Why? Why doesn't it say chatas? by Shavuos. So the Yerushalmi says, because since we're makabel the Torah on Shavuos, God considers it like we never sinned. I know Kabbalas HaTorah is a big mitzvah, but how could Rebbeinu Shalom consider like we didn't sin? What's the mechanism with which He erases our averos? You hear the Yerushalmi says, every year on Shavuos, when we're makabel the Torah, the Rebbeinu Shalom wipes out our averos. Hashem says, since you're makabel the Torah, I consider it as if you never sinned. Consider that I never sinned just because we're makabel the Torah? Perhaps the reason is like this. Every year on Shavuos, we reenact Kabbalas HaTorah. Kabbalas HaTorah is a gerus, and every year the Rebbeinu Shalom says, I consider it again like you're converting, like a Gershon Esgayer. It's like you're a newborn child. Every Shavuos is an opportunity to have a clean slate, to have a fresh start. Rebbeinu Shalom is giving us a special opportunity to mechaper our averos, and looking forward, Mirz Hashem, whoever's able to make it, to see you on Shavuos. Wish you all a Chag Kosher v'Sameach, a good Yom Tov. Thank you for coming.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.